Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and one of the things that many of us know is that the public school system absolutely positively sucks. Our kids are being harmed in irreparable ways, and it's up to us to find solutions for the education of our children that go beyond depending on their oppressors to miseducate them. And so, in order to kind of address this issue, I brought an old friend to the class, Miss Nomalanga Mushali Moses, who's going to kind of talk to us about this a little bit. So, before I begin, I want to ask Noma, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, boys. How are you?
I'm doing really well, really well. Now, you and I wanted to, we were talking sort of, off the record about the problems in the school system, just what it's like getting your black child through the system, just how many of our children are, miseducated, uneducated, abused, mistreated, etc. in the school system. I was one of those kids. I went through that, and then you started telling me stories about your kids and kind of what you started to see that made you actually make some adjustments. And so you actually took the bold move of actually educating your own children at home. Now, before I get into that, though, I want to ask you, what are some of the things about the school system that alarmed you as the mother of black children?
Boys, I had probably the worst experience in the sense that I didn't necessarily only have to deal with a bad public school system. I dealt with an all-white public school system. So my children were a little bit younger because we've been homeschooling for 3 years now. They were a little bit younger, and my son was the only black kid in his class, and my daughter was the only black kid in her class. So not only were they in a system that wasn't necessarily the best for them, but they also had that added um, burden. It's a burden. They had that added burden of being the kid who, if there needed to be a slot for special needs, they were the first choice. If anything happened, if there's any behavioral problems, they were the first choice in terms of who should be given that title. The great thing is, I actually was already involved in terms of my kids' education at home, and I paid attention. So I knew that what school system was saying about them contradicted what I knew about them. The short story is that my kids experienced bullying. They were being put into classes that were below their ability level that I knew and I had measured. We actually had, education specialists and, child behavioral behavior experts in our family, and we had had our kids assessed in a home environment, so we knew exactly where they were, what their scores were, everything. And the school system actually graded them at times in order to get them into programs, which I think the school system gets paid for. So it was a horrible experience, and I felt like I had no choice but to take my kids out of school. And I do understand not everybody has that choice. I did put a lot of time, energy, thought, research into it before I actually did the bold thing of taking them out. And my husband was, he was supportive of that move. So that made it easier. But a lot of bullying, a lot of bad treatment, and unfortunately, it wasn't just from the other kids; it was also from the teachers and the administration. And also, we have a slightly unconventional life, so that made our life actually better because I can do more with my children in the sense that we've used the whole world as a learning environment. So this has worked out well for us. And the story's longer, but that's the short of it.
Wow. So I've known you for a few years, and you're not one of those irresponsible parents. You're not a parent who's going to go cuss out the teacher because they discipline your child. You're
No,
not a parent who's not going to value education in your home. But even you were having these problems in the school system
absolutely,
at an early
absolutely.
age. I mean, your kids are
Mhm.
not that old yet, right?
I think at the time, yes, at the time my son was only about 3.5. And again, let me reiterate this, boys. I have two kids right now, and another on the way, but I have two kids, and the more energetic, maybe challenging child is the older one, who's a girl. And then the more quiet, and kind of gentle one is the boy. But where I was hearing about behavioral problems was from the boy. So that was an instant alarm. And actually, I did actually end up, I was fortunate at the time because I worked 4 days a week. So on every fifth day of the week, I spent most of my day at his school, and I participated in a lot of their activities just so I could have firsthand knowledge of exactly what they're saying. And of course, when I was there, none of the things that they reported happened. But in my absence, they did say he would get violent, aggressive, and things like that. And I just knew that was not correct. So my next question was, what exact kind of environment are you creating for a child who's normally so peaceful, easygoing, agreeable, to go all the way onto the other end of the spectrum and become a violent and aggressive child? That was my first red flag or alarm that went off. And over time, I started to see that, it's unfortunate to have to say it, but Black kids walk in with a label of bad hanging over their head. And anything that they do, unfortunately, in a school system that doesn't value them is perceived as negative. And if they're not negative, they're pushed to being negative. And I've had, my children had firsthand experience. I think, anybody who's ever talked to me knew that I cried, real tears, like cried, literally cried when I thought about the implications of what I had put my kids in, a system that just didn't value them and was deteriorating them as human beings. So I took them out and I started homeschooling them.
Wow. So you were working full time, and your husband's working full time,
Yes.
and you got these young children going to school, and they're they're sending back reports telling you that your 3 year old is I guess a demon in training, that he's some horrible evil person when he is away from you, but when you
Right.
see him, it's in complete contradiction to these reports,
Right.
and so you're dealing with the emotional baggage of that in terms of just figuring out like what is going on here,
Right.
and so but it's interesting. So at that point, a lot of people would feel like they don't have any choice but to just kind of leave their kids in that system and maybe move them to a different school, hope for the best. But you actually took a different route. I mean, you didn't have any training in homeschooling at the time, if I'm correct,
No.
right?
No.
So you pulled your kids out at that point and just said, "I'm going to educate them at home with me." Is that what happened?
Well, I did go through a transition period of about, I think it was a whole semester. I'm not sure how, I can't remember how long it was, where I became a very, very strong presence in the school whenever I could. I was, again, fortunate in that I had a very flexible schedule as a college professor. So as long as I was showing up for my lectures and my office time or whatever it was called, I had the freedom and the room to drive back to the school and be in gym time with them, be on the playground with them, go on field trips with them, be a room mom. I mean, I took this really seriously, and this was for both of their schools, so they knew exactly who I was at those schools. But during that time, while I made myself a presence in the school, I was also doing the research. What does it take to homeschool a child? I was looking into our finances. What if I quit my job? What does that mean for us? And again, another fortunate thing is I've always been a person with a side hustle. So I thought to myself, okay, what if I, dropped the job and just focused more on the side hustle from home and made it a full-time job, made that my full-time work, and then homeschooled my kids. And I began to make that transition. I want to inoculate any parent that's thinking about doing this. We lived in a five-bedroom, two-bath house, a very nice lifestyle, but it was in a white neighborhood. And the school system was so-called good, but it was not good for us. We had the income to support that, but backing out of my job dropped my income. But it's still absolutely the best decision that my husband and I have ever made. Now we live in a smaller townhouse. It's still comfortable. It's still great. We have a great life. But the most important thing is that we've refocused in terms of putting our kids' education first and their well-being first. And we're going to continue to do that while they're small and while they need it. And that's the best decision I ever made. And I shouldn't say I, because we made it together with my husband. But trust me, I was the more forceful one. The mama bear came out of me, and we did it, and I don't regret it at all.
Wow. So I guess this is my last question, but it's one I have to ask. What was that like at first? When the first day that they realize they don't have to go to school and they're home with you, and you're trying to make this transition. You're kind of going into these uncharted waters. I mean, I know you did a lot of research on
Mhm.
homeschooling. I mean, you've really you actually guide other parents now on how to do this. But what was that
Right.
like for you when you just took that courageous move to kind of do something that you hadn't done before?
For me, it was actually very scary. My confidence level was shaky. I've been trained to teach adults, or at least what we're calling adults, 18 and up. And I felt confident doing that for years because I did it and I had the education and the background and the mentorship and so forth. But I wasn't really feeling equipped or adequate to teach little children because, people usually study elementary education or early childhood education or whatever it is, and education at that level. So I didn't feel my most confident. However, I took the approach of I'm their mother, and if I'm not willing to go through the process of growing, educating myself, and getting the information and resources to make sure that these kids get what they need, why would I ever expect some white lady from some suburb who doesn't know who they are, or some white guy somewhere? Why would I have the expectation that that person would do it?
If you were my preacher and I were in your church, I'd be in the front row
Say
saying,
hallelujah.
"Yes, Lord, right on, girl. You say
I,
that, but go, please continue."
I had to have that conversation with myself. And like I said, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I cried a lot, but because it was so painful to think of the fact that you trusted these people to educate your kids and they never had the intention. They only saw them as a problem and little people that didn't belong there. So I just had to do it, and I think that's what most parents may have to have that talking to about them with themselves. Of I know I may not be at this point in time necessarily equipped, but I'm willing to make that transition to educate myself, develop myself. To put my kids in a position where they're getting the best in terms of education, in terms of development, and preserving these kids' hearts, self esteem, what they're exposed to, and what they think about themselves. And the second thing about it also is when I had a look at the curriculum at some of these schools, it's white centered. It really is. I've had this conversation with a number of people. I'll tell you a quick example is my daughter came home with I can't remember if she was in kindergarten or first grade. She came home with an assignment that I was supposed to help her. My husband actually helped her do the homework. And she was supposed to draw a rainbow. And in the rainbow, she's supposed to include all the colors she can find on her body. Now, if I'm a little white girl, okay, my skin is pinkish, my eyes are maybe blue, maybe green, my hair is blonde, yellowish. Okay, so I already have three beautiful, bright colors. Well, ask me what colors my daughter had as an option. Her hair is brown, dark brown, maybe black. Her eyes are brown. Her skin is brown. So she had this brown rainbow. um, this brown rainbow with different shades of brown. And brown kids, black kids are obviously not ugly. You and I know that. But that was an ugly rainbow. And it doesn't seem like anything, but it just goes to show that when you're thinking within the context of, I'm a white lady and this would be fun and so on, and you're not thinking about other kids from other cultures and another perspective. That was just one example, but there were so many other ones. Even when they tried to be culturally sensitive, it was terrible. They gave, I remember another example is they gave the little kids assignments as little animals, and they had little stickers, and they could choose. The teacher chose animals for them. Guess what? My daughter got a monkey.
No.
Yes. And the
Oh
teacher didn't
God.
understand why it was not okay to put a sticker of a monkey on my door. And she really didn't know. She was bright red. She was crying when my husband and I confronted her about it. And again, I don't think she's an evil woman who wakes up in the morning to go and destroy black kids. But the truth is, if you're a parent and you see this environment and you realize that you've put your child in that environment, every day they spend more time with that woman than they spend with me. I couldn't take it. Um, and 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 I don't know what else to say, but there's more examples where that came from. So this may be the worst example. There are homeschool moms that have since connected with, who come from environments around the country where there's more black kids, more brown kids, and the teachers are brown and so on. But there's still problems. There's still so many issues where they still feel like I had to take my kids out. Some people have values and belief systems that just don't match with the school system. Some kids have special needs. Some people have unconventional lives. Some people feel like the school is treating their children bad. There's so many reasons not to put your kids in that environment. And when you take all of them collectively, in my opinion, homeschooling is the best thing you can do for your kids, even if it seems like it may be too much of a challenge.
Hmm. I agree with you. I think that I think that when you look at stuff like this and you start thinking about just nature, and, and the reason I focus on nature is because things that are natural don't have to be taught. Like you don't have to teach people to fall in love, to have sex, make baby. Things like you don't have to
Right,
teach that. They just know it. Um,
right,
well, you don't have to teach a mother to be bonded to her child. It just happens. And the thing is, the fundamental rule is that the mother is the first teacher of that child. So the most natural teacher that that child could ever have is the child's mother, and
right,
then secondly would be the father, right? So really, when you talk about this radical idea of educating your own children, you're really actually only being radical in the sense that you're going from that which is artificial back to that which is natural, right?
right.
And so I think that transition, and it's ironic that we have a world where people are so addicted to that which is unnatural. They're so trained on that that you give them something natural and they say, well, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to figure this out. Well, you're going to figure it out. Just rely on the fact that there's nobody that loves that child more than you and your husband.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, education, is most directly facilitated through love. Children respond to people who love them more than
Yeah.
they respond to people who don't love them. And so I love that. And the other thing that's interesting about what you said is, this idea of your kids spending more time with somebody other than you than they're spending with you. That's another weird thing that was sort of created through industrialization in America, and the corporations kind of pushed government policy and created movements, artificial movements that it persuaded parents to believe that you're not supposed to waste your time with taking care of your kids. You're supposed to be out giving your whole life to the corporation, which is absolute nonsense. And it's really nonsense when you talk about the black community because of another thing that we don't have to teach ourselves, we don't have to convince each other of, is the fact that we're being mistreated as a community in all of these systems. You go to the educational system, you see so many problems, so many kids. We don't have to lay out a bunch of statistics for parents to know what their kids are going through in the school system. They're seeing it, or going into the workplace. We talk about people starting their own business. I don't have to explain to people that corporate America is racist. They've seen it. They're telling me. Criminal justice system. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So I think that what's important, and this is why I want people to listen to you, and also you do teach a class on this at the homeschoolguide.com. The reason I want people to listen to you is because
The Black
they
Homeschool Guide.
sorry, the Black
Just the
Homeschool Guide.
Black Homeschool
Sorry,
Guide.
the Black Homeschoolguide.com. The Black Homeschool Guide, because you're black, like the rainbow. But but the reason I want people to listen to you is because people should realize they have choices. You always have an option. You should never let racism make you feel trapped. Like there's nothing else you can do, nowhere you can go, no way you can build things for yourself. You can. I mean, you did it. You homeschooled your kids, and it seems that it's been pretty amazing, right? I mean, after the initial
Yes,
kinks.
absolutely. I can't say it enough. It's the best decision we ever made for our whole family and for our kids. And I keep saying I have to inoculate parents and say that it's not easy. Nothing that really, really counts in the end is ever just easy. You have to put in the work, you have to put in the time. But certainly a great decision and a very, very rewarding experience, and life changing.
Okay, well, I love it. I love it. And thank you, Noma, for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Thank you, boys.
All right, and everybody, this is Nomalanga Mushali Moses. If you'd like to learn more from her about homeschooling your own kids, go to theblackhomeschoolguide.com. Make sure I got that right. The word black, that's important, just like the rainbow. Theblackhomeschoolguide.com, and you can check out her class on homeschooling. And me, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.